What's up, everybody? Welcome to part two of the Righteousness series. Today, we'll be looking at being saved versus Christ-like character. And today's CTQs, critical thinking questions, are: what do you think of the Charlie Kirk situation? We'll get into that. Second one is: should a believer judge another person? And third, why do you assemble together? Or why do you go to church? And then a much broader of the same question: why should we assemble together? And what are the criteria to be saved? I think this is a mistake. I don't think we're going to talk about that one. But those are the CTQs for today. Last episode, part one of Righteousness, we looked at Jesus's teaching and focus on how you treat your neighbor. And I'll put a link to the video either here or here. I'm not sure where. All right, so make sure you check that out. Part one, dealing with and the greatest commandment of them all, and who is your neighbor, and so forth. All right, so today we want to continue this deep investigative look into righteousness and what it looks like, or what it should look like for the believer, being saved versus having Christ-like character. So first one, what do you guys think about Charlie Kirk? Let's watch a video and we'll be back.
To let you know who I have known Charlie Kirk to be as a man, let me share just this brief interaction with a student at Charlie's table on a university campus. The student asked, "Are you a Christian?" Charlie's answer, "Very much so." He didn't say, "I go to church." He didn't say, I try to be a good person." He didn't say, "I talk to the man upstairs." He answered straightforwardly. The next question, after Charlie said, "Very much so," the student said, "Why?" Good question. Could I set up a table here? Have everybody come and tell me why? Would everybody come? Why? Once again, as straightforward as it could be put. Charlie said, "Jesus saved my life. I'm a sinner. I gave my life to Christ. It is the most important decision I have ever made." The next question, "So you believe the Bible's real?" "Yes, I believe the Bible is true and real." Student, "Why is that?" Charlie said, "Well, the technical answer is there has never been an archaeological discovery that has contradicted the truth of the Bible. And then, of course, the wisdom." This is off the cuff. There is not a truth of the Bible that if you apply it to your life, does not improve your life dramatically. And then finally, he's not finished. Finally, we have the most accurate and transparent canon of history, robust amounts that one can have of the most important figure to ever live in the history of the world, Jesus of Nazareth. And the resurrection is the pinpoint of my belief that Jesus died, that he did rise from the grave so that we might live. The student said, "Thank you very much," and walked away. So before you have an opinion, at least be informed.
So, yeah, I agree with the sentiments here shared by Pastor Rod Parsley. That as you can see, I don't know if you guys can see the caption. He said, "That's bold faith." He stood flat-footed and unshaken. Um, I agree. That is bold faith. I think, yes, Charlie Kirk professed his belief in Jesus very clear, very loud, unashamed. Um, and in fact, just focusing on that, he's a champion of the faith, right? That bold and that to declare who he is and what he believes. So, yes, 100%. All right. So let's look at another video here of Charlie.
We're going to remove my appendix and you're a black lesbian. See a black pilot, you wonder, you say,
To let you know,
I'm going to remove my appendix and you're a black lesbian. See a black pilot, you wonder, you say, I hope they are qualified. If I see a black pilot, I'm going to be like, boy, I hope he's qualified. I'm dealing with somebody in customer service who's a moronic black woman. I wonder, is she there because of her excellence? Or is she there because of affirmative action? Thomas Sowell and Justice Clarence Thomas are far better black models to celebrate than Martin Luther King. Period. End of story. This guy is not worthy of a national holiday. He is not worthy of godlike status. In fact, I think it's really hard. You do not have the brain processing power to otherwise be taken really seriously. You had to go steal a white person's slot to go be taken somewhat seriously.
Well, Charlie, it now seems like you don't have the brain processing power to be taken seriously as well. This is exactly what happened.
That was also Charlie Kirk, and a lot of his views and comments that are all out there for you to see. You can see much more. So the next critical question here is, what should a believer judge another person? Right? Should we judge another person? Let's go straight to the scripture here, Matthew 7. It says here, let me get myself out the way. It says, do not judge others, and you will not be judged. For you will be treated as you treat others. The standard you use in judging is the standard by which you will be judged. So this is a scripture a lot of people use to say, aren't you a Christian? You're not supposed to be judging. Bro, yo, aren't you a Christian, bro? Yo, niggas out here just always be judging people, yo. So let me just tell you how I read this. When I read scripture, it doesn't say do not judge. What a lot of people do when they read scripture is you see the first three words, do not judge. That's what people do. They'll just read that part and say, I thought you're a believer. Bible says don't judge. You have to read the entire concept here, right? Now, when I read this, it says, do not judge others, comma. You have to, you can't exclude the rest of it. It says, do not judge others and you will not be judged, right? And then it explains why it's making that statement. Why? For you will be treated as you treat others. And then it's further explaining what it means. Because the standard you use to judge is the same standard by which you will be judged. Right? So when I read this, it is saying, hey, you can judge. It's okay to judge. There's no problem in judging. Go ahead, judge. But understand that whenever you decide to sit in the seat of the judge and judge someone, the standard by which you are judging this person, scripture is saying that same standard now applies to you. So it is not saying don't judge. It's okay to judge. Judge all you want, but be very careful. right? When we see Jesus with the Jesus with the woman that was caught in adultery. For those who don't know the story, there was a woman caught in the very act of adultery, Scripture says, and these men found her and they brought her to where Jesus was. And according to the then law, if a woman was caught in the act of adultery, she should be stoned by by the Moses law, right? So they came to say, by Moses' law, we have a right to stone her. Jesus responds and does something very clever. If he says, well, those that were without sin cast the first stone, right? These men came and they wanted to sit in the seat of the judge, right? And notice Jesus never refuted whether this woman should be stoned or not. He never addressed that because they said by the law we have a right to do this. So I think Jesus agreed with them, like, yeah, you guys are right. She should be judged and should be stoned. But Jesus said, well, wait a minute. Before you decide to sit in the seat of the judge, understand what that does. When you sit in the seat of the judge, the same judgment you are about to execute on someone, that same judgment and degree of judgment is now going to be applied to your life. So he says it in this way. Well, sure, she's deserving to be, by the law, she's deserving of being stoned to death. Those of you that aren't guilty of anything, cast the first stone. And the story continues and said everybody left. And Jesus was the only one remaining. And he says, well, neither do I condemn you, go and sin no more. So in Scripture, it is very clear that judging is allowed. You can judge. But every time you choose to judge, you are incurring the same standard by which you are applying to someone. Let's watch this last video of Charlie.
Execution. That'll make my day better. I want to see him on a public block and execution. That'll make my day better. I want to see him on a public block and get him be publicly executed. And I think that would be justice. You think children should have, you should see it? What is the age? At what age should you start to see public executions?
16. I think you could do it earlier. I think you maybe at age 12,
whenever
6th grade or so. You are a person, they're old enough to, you don't need to like really wallow in it and have them be broken on a wheel or anything. But if it was something like chopping, if we had a guillotine or something.
I want to watch that execution. That'll make my day. I want to watch.
When I saw this video, very alarming. And I believe we have seen the justice of God being executed in Charlie's life, unfortunately, because he decided to sit in the seat of the judge. Remember, and that's okay. You can judge. But as we read, he decided to sit in the seat of the judge and judge someone else. The same standard got applied to him, and in the worst, most unfortunate way. I do not wish that for anyone. He died with the same parameters you just saw him say with his own mouth. He said, Charlie Kirk, he said, whoever he was talking about, I can't remember, should be executed. And we should bring back public executions. Then he asked the question to the panels, and we should invite children to see. How young do you think? Unfortunately, because he decided to sit in that seat of the judge, the same standard got applied to him, and he died in the same way. He was publicly executed for all to see in the public square. Even children saw the videos. It is a dangerous thing. What we see in Scripture is telling us You can judge. It's okay to judge. You have the free will to do so. But it is a dangerous thing to judge. Remember the woman that was caught in adultery? Even Jesus didn't want no parts of it. After all the men left, he said, I will not even judge you. And by the way, Jesus was the only one that was sinless. He had the right to cast the stone and stone her. But he himself, understanding this rule that God has placed in the earth, that he is the only judge. But you have free will, you can judge. Jesus said, I don't want no parts of it. I'm not even going to judge you either. Because if I do, that standard will be applied to my life. Go and sin no more. We've got to be very, very careful when we decide to sit at the seat of the judge. You know, there's another part of scripture that talks about before you judge. I think it's the same scripture coming down further. He says, take out the speck that's in your eye first before you talk about the speck that's in your brother's or your sister's eye. Right? The same concept here. Again, it's okay to judge. The Bible does not say do not judge, period. It's okay to judge. It's just that when or if you decide to judge, be very careful, because the same standard by which you are judging is the same standard that will be applied to you. All right. I want to switch gears a little bit here with assembling. Not really shift gears, but what Charlie did a lot, he did a lot of assembling, where, as you guys saw, he would meet in public squares at schools and would bring an audience and church. We go to church and we assemble. So my question is in the CTQs here, why do you assemble together? Or why should we assemble together? Part one, I mentioned that gathering or going to church doesn't make you holy, right? Very clear on that. But the gathering was really designed for something else. So let's get into it here. And this is where a lot of church use this scripture. Do not forsake the assembling of yourself. I think we have weaponized it to get people to come to church or to continue to come to church, or to, I don't know, put a fear or a reverence over the people's mind so that they continue to come to our gatherings. And this is a scripture here in Hebrews. It says, let us hold tightly without wavering to keep the hope we affirm, for God can be trusted to keep his promises, right? So it's encouraging you here. We got to hold tight to what we believe. And let us not neglect the meeting together. Do not forsake the assembling of yourselves, as some people do, but encourage one another, especially now that the day of his return is drawing near. And that was way back then. So I guess we're still waiting. So here it is, a scripture that said, do not forsake the assembling of yourselves, as some has done. To be clear, this scripture is not saying that if you don't go to church, you are not saved, or if you don't go to church, you are on your way to hell. It is saying don't neglect gathering together of like-minded people, right? Because we know the importance of gathering and how gathering produces a strengthening. And when you gather, we're supposed to encourage each other, right? Now, this is a chart here of the early church. Back then, the early church, when they met together, there's a few differences here. They met in homes. So when churches would gather, they would meet in homes, sometimes in secret, because remember, the early church was persecuted a lot. So just like in other places today, churches are, in certain countries, They can't even meet. You would go to jail, you would lose property. So the early church would meet in secret. They would meet in homes. Today, most of us, we meet in buildings. The reason they would gather were to pray, learn, eat, and to help each other grow in their understanding of the faith. Today we worship, we listen to sermon, and we join programs. Um, Back then, the risk of gathering, you would lose your property, you go to jail, or you can die. Usually today, in most places, it's usually safe. Of course, some face dangers. And the reason for gathering was to stay strong in the faith and to show unity. And today, that is the same reason. We want to stay strong in the faith and to encourage each other. That was the purpose of gathering, right? So that we would stay strong in the faith. So, gathering, again, does not make you holy, or it should not be the thing that is making you holy or righteous, I should say, living for Christ. You should already be living for Christ, and we should use the gathering, the assembling of ourselves, to sharpen and to strengthen what is already there, right? But gathering is a powerful tool, right? Make no mistake about it. Charlie Kirk used gatherings to strengthen his point and to assemble like-minded people so they can talk. Schools use the tool of gathering students and separation of certain skill sets of students to do what? To enhance their skill or to indoctrinate them, right? Indoctrination is not always bad. Indoctrination can be good, right? Our government, we use the power of gathering. The Democrats and the Republicans and the Senate, they gather together to argue and to find resolve, to move the economy forward. And we also know the dangers of not gathering. If you don't gather, if our elected officials don't gather, the economy can crash, right? If they don't gather and work out and argue, our gatherings in our churches need to become more dynamic. We need to be encouraging, not, I think we're very good at encouraging, but we need to be teaching systematically. We need to be having discussions. We need to be arguing, right? Because there's different beliefs. There's nothing wrong with having disagreements, right? The Bible talks about, come, let us reason together, right? So this notion of gathering is a very powerful tool, but we should not mix it as if I have to gather in order to remain holy, right? It's a tool that is used to sharpen, right? Most successful Fortune 500 companies, they gather their CEOs every week, every Monday or Tuesday or whatever day it is, to do what? To sharpen, to execute together where we're going, to envision, to explain, right? I believe our gatherings need to be more dynamic again. We need to have more explanation, more systematic teachings of the word. One of my belief is I believe we need to separate how we meet. Most Pentecostal type church settings, the structure is worship, word, respond to the word. I believe we need to separate it. I believe we need to have, when we come and we're teaching, we're just teaching, and we teach and we go home. If we're coming for worship, we're coming for worship and we're going home, right? If we're coming for prayer, we come for prayer and we go home. We need to separate. I think we're trying to do too much sometimes in our gathering that is not effective or impactful enough. And Hence, the results that we're seeing are not as strong as they could be. Um, the gathering here that we see in scripture is also referring to the importance of gathering your family together, right? I was looking at a statistics here. Let me see if I can find it of families that eat together. Oh, it's there for you to see. Let me just read some of it. Kids who regularly eat meals with their families tend to eat more fruits and vegetables, more fiber and calcium and food and stuff like that. Meals prepared at the home are generally lower in calories, blah, 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 right? Families that regularly dine together reports lower stress levels. For example, about 95% of parents says that sharing a meal helps to reduce stress. Children and teens who share more family meals tend to have higher self esteem. We're talking about gathering here and the importance of gathering, right? They have high self esteem just because you share a meal frequently on some sort of a schedule. Frequent family meals are associated with lower childhood um, uh, frequent family meals are associated with lower likelihood of children or teens to engage in risky behaviors like smoking, drugs, and alcohol. Kids who eat with their family regularly more often tend to do better in school. Participation in family meals um, produces better behavior and fewer con- conduct problems. Yeah, right. So there's a lot of evidence, just the gathering of the family. The same is true for the gathering of you and your loved one, you and your wife, you and your husband, you and your boyfriend. We know if there's not enough of that deliberate, intentional gathering, what happens to the relationship? It begins to wane, right? The same thing happens if you are not, if you don't have a strong religious or kingdom culture that you constantly go, and you're not just going because I have to go, but you're going because you are going to be encouraged, you are going to be fed, you are going to find answers. If you're not getting none of those things, stop going to that gathering, right? Because remember, going to the gathering is not what makes you righteous. You should already be righteous, but I'm going to the gathering to increase in strength, to increase in understanding and wisdom, and to be encouraged. So if I'm not getting that, it makes no sense to go. Find a place that you can gather to get these things, right? It's better to not go to a particular church service that doesn't provide these things and spend time with your wife, spend time with your husband. Gather in that way. Pull your family together for a meal. Um, have one-on-ones with your siblings. Call your brother, call your sister. Spend time with them, right? That's the importance of gathering, is what scripture is saying. So don't let church folk manipulate you into, hey, do not forsake the assembling of yourself. I haven't seen you in church really lately. Yeah, I haven't come to church because it's boring. If it's boring, let them know. Why? Because each joint have to supply, right? If I feel like I'm not getting anything when I come here, you should tell your leaders. You should tell the organizers of this gathering that we need to do more here because I feel like I'm wasting my time coming here, so that they can improve, right? We're not just saying these things just to make people feel bad, but we're saying this because we understand what scripture is talking about. And when it talks about the gathering, we should be encouraged, we should be sharpened, we should be taught. But if we're not getting those things, you know, let's get out of here. In conclusion, here, I'm wrapping it up here. So let us be clear, right? Gathering together was not designed to save or to be evangelistic in nature. It was designed to sharpen what is already there. I would say that it is not the church's, the church as we know it, responsibility to save people or to increase their numbers. It is your responsibility. It is the individual person to go into all the world and to preach the gospel, not Sunday service. It was not designed for that, right? So going to church does not make you righteous. And we saw this in the series, the last series, I'll put a link somewhere. But what makes you righteous is how you treat your neighbor. All right, let's see. All right, so before I go, just to revisit the critical thinking questions here. Why should we assemble? Why do you assemble? Why do you go to church? Really think about this and make sure that it's beneficial. Make sure that you are growing. Do not be religious in your activities, right? This is what this message is really targeting. Deleting religious behavior. Don't be like the scribes and Pharisees. You're just doing an activity under the assumption that now, because I've went to church, I'm holy. No, you're supposed to be holy before you come here, right? So that's it for part 2 of this series, Righteousness. Look out for part 3 coming. Peace out.